Welcome to the Spiritual Life Management Podcast, where we help you bring balance in your life and live to your fullest potential. With your host, Gretchen Smith. Welcome, listeners. Thank you for joining me today. I always believe in divine timing, and today's guest is joining us with perfect timing. We really need him on the show today. Dr. Moss, also known as the Undoctor, is here today. Dr. Fred Moss has served in the mental health industry, having consulted with patients, practitioners, medical facilities, nonprofit organizations, and community groups for over 40 years. As a non-diagnosing psychiatrist, he is committed to shifting the conversation of mental illness on a global scale. Dr. Fred is the author of Creative 8, Healing Through Creativity and Self-Expression. He is also the founder of Welcome to Humanity, which is an organization and podcast that directly addresses the conversations of disorders, diagnosis, prescriptions, treatments, methodologies, and all topics related to mental health. He is also working on Global Madness, an exciting film project that explores how mental illness and mental health are managed in various diverse areas of our planet. Welcome to the show, Dr. Fred.
Thank you. It's really great to be here. Thanks for having me, Gretchen. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Well, as am I. So that was a pretty impressive bio for you, but tell us, how did you become the Undoctor?
It's funny, that's a really, sometimes I get asked a question like that, but not often that direct. So let's talk a little bit about that. It's like, I get to really look back at, that's a good question. When did I become the Undoctor, and why did that happen? And you could say that it happened even before I went into medical school, but I came to the planet in order to communicate and have a conversation or two and connect people to each other. I was born into a family in a fair amount of chaos and disarray, and I had two brothers, 10 years and 14 years older than me, and my two parents who apparently weren't getting along very well. And little Freddie was going to be the bundle of joy that brought them connected again. So I've really had a full-time job since I arrived in this idea of, creating proper conversations or joy or connections or having people harmonize and resonate with each other in order to heal them. And it really has been a full-time job since the first second I got here. So we'll fast forward a little bit. I was looking to communicate through school. I was looking to learn how to be a master communicator. And I thought that that's what school was going to be about. Even when I went to kindergarten, I was already a bit precocious. I knew how to read and I knew how to write and I knew how to do simple math and stuff. But my friends, in kindergarten, they didn't know any of that. They just knew how to throw blocks and, pick their nose and stuff. And I wanted to do that too, but I also wanted to read Henry Huggins. So I could tell that communication wasn't going to happen in kindergarten. But I thought maybe in the later years, late elementary school or junior high or high school. And, when I got to those places, that communication wasn't really being driven forward in those areas. In fact, it was being constricted and contracted. And, you were just told to sit down and do what the professor told you to do and do it exactly as he told you to do it, he or she. And if you did so, then you were allowed to pass into the next level. And so I got pretty good at that, but not very good in the classroom, as all of us know, as far as open discourse. I went to the University of Michigan. Same thing happened. It was really more or less a contraction inside the classroom. So I dropped out and I came back after a year and a half of finding myself, some good work that I did in Berkeley, California. And I thought I'd get a job in the up and coming field of computers. And the only computer in Michigan was at the University of Michigan. So I went there. And again, same thing happened. I was just like, this isn't what I want to do. Okay, now we get to the point of how I became the Undoctor, because I got a job. My mom said, okay, you can drop out again. That's fine, but you got to get a job. I was sworn that I would never go back to school at all. And there was a couple of applications out there waiting for me. One of them was at the unemployment office. I could have been an unemployment officer. Or another one was working with children in a state mental hospital. And I took that one. It was coming sooner. And I started doing that. And all of a sudden I was communicating, and getting paid for it. And I actually had a job where communication and connection, as I already knew, were at the heart of all healing. With these, we'll call them children, but really they were just other human beings 6 or 7 years younger than me. The thing I hated about that job, Gretchen, was the way psychiatry was treating those kids. We would call the psychiatrist and tell them that Timmy was up too late or Johnny and Jimmy had gotten into a fight. And he'd come down and he'd, essentially talk to Jimmy for like 3 seconds and then talk to us for like 7 seconds and then write an order in the chart. And then we'd have to go find him and hold him down in the quiet room and, yank on the hip of his sweatpants and then jam him full of an injection of adult grade, antipsychotic schizophrenic medication and maybe a couple other medications. And if he didn't speak for the next 12 or 24 hours, we'd call that a success. I just found that to be so barbaric. And by the way, Gretchen, that's still happening. It's happened tens of thousands of times today already.
Yeah.
Like that's not new. That's not something that's not rare. That's not back then. That's right now.
No, I know. And I understand that. It's just, I hate to hear that.
I know. We hate to hear it. That's why they leave it in closed doors and you can't visit. So
right.
I was so appalled by that I made it my business to go back to school one last time and learn how to be a doctor where I could bring communication and connection into the heart of the matter. My brother was already a psychiatrist, so I knew I could do it. And so I went back to school, and 13 years later, I was a psychiatrist. And no time did I stop being a childcare worker. So during those 13 years, I moonlighted as a childcare worker the whole time. Mm-hmm. And I came out, but in the meantime, Prozac had been introduced to the world. And Prozac was as much a paradigmatic shift as anything that's going on in the present day. Let me say that.
Right.
It really changed everything. It was biological psychiatry all of a sudden. It was chemicals imbalances all of a sudden. And you know who was responsible for delivering medicine? Which profession? Well, of course, it was psychiatry. So now I was actually doing that, which I promised I would never do. And I did that for years and years. I diagnosed people, which I didn't want to do. And I then medicated people, which I doubly didn't want to do. This only worked for, I did it because I'm a doctor and what do you, that's my job and type. But my, speak of spirituality, it was the ultimate soul sacrifice to be that duplicitous. Right. So in 2006, I decided to change my mind. And because I couldn't live with myself, Gretchen, it was really a matter of not being able to live with myself. I've had 40,000 patients in my, who have at least called me a doctor, their doctor for a second or two in their life, given nursing homes and emergency rooms and all that. And I just decided I'd do something different, which is what I wanted to do in the first place, which is I just took out, my low risk patients and started taking them off of medications. And lo and behold, they got way better, like reliably way, 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 way better. I was like, wow, this is an interesting finding. So I kept on doing it and, kind of the people who were ready to have that done in my practice, we did it. And again, reliably, people got way better. Not only did they get better off their medicines, but in many and most cases, their actual initial diagnosis just disappeared. You could say that was my true voice moment, or you could say that when I started being the undoctor, but it took a while because that field is so entrenched in conventional thinking, of course. It's a very, very high-powered field inside of medicine. And in order for me to start doing that on a regular basis, I would have to back out carefully and gracefully, which I have to tell you with the grace of higher power and all sorts of luck and fortune, I was able to do. And when I started backing out in 2016, 17, and 18, most recently, I really, there was nothing left to do but just inject creativity and connection at the heart of all healing and realize that these medications were often perpetuating the symptoms they're marketed to treat, or in more unfortunate cases were actually causing symptoms that they were marketed to treat. And it wasn't the medicine's fault. It's not the medicine's fault. It's not the doctor's fault. It's not anyone's fault. It's just a system that's built that way.
Right.
But when I began being the undoctor, which is a moniker that I got from a friend a few years ago, he's like, Fred, you're the undoctor. I was like, wow, thanks for that branding. He's like, yeah, that'll be $10,000. I'm like, no, man, I'll just, I'll buy you lunch. You go, okay, that's fine. So I became the undoctor because what I really started realizing is what I like doing more than anything is giving people back their lives, which is why I came into the world, right? You remember that story.
Right.
And it's a matter of being the undoctor, meaning undiagnosing. No. Look, wait, let me make it very clear to your audience. If we have somebody there who's really happy with their diagnosis and their treatment inside the conventional psychiatric system, and they're going to argue that they have their illness and that, they finally figured it out and now they got a treatment that's working, by all means, more power to you. And I mean it. I'm not putting you down or looking down at you or disagreeing with you. Like, great for you. Anytime in the world you find something that works, great for you. Great. This is not for you. This is for the hundreds of thousands, or should I say millions or tens of millions of people who are pretty sure that their system is not being treated at the highest level, and that they've been either misdiagnosed or not diagnosed or diagnosed too many times, and or are taking medicines that they're sure are either making them worse or certainly not making them better. Because when we unmedicate and we undiagnose and then we undoctrinate, that's a word I made up, yay me. What we do is we step people away from the whole system of feeling sick and get them back to their own humanity, which, when aligned with spirituality and, nutrition and, mindfulness and service and creativity and, pampering oneself and taking care and, loving and being graceful, accepting, compassionate, forgiving, all those really high-powered, high vibrational activities that us humans have at our disposal. Guess what happens, Gretchen? I think people heal.
Right.
People heal, Gretchen. People with really, really crazy sort of diagnoses, guess what happens to them?
They heal.
They do, Gretchen. That's what happens. It's like that easy. It's not easy.
Yes.
It's not easy.
So, question for you.
Yeah.
You said that you began with your, I guess, less severe clients, right?
Right. Lower risk, I called it. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. And what other items did you integrate into their life?
That's great. So the first thing we integrated was, we're going to start with the fact that you and I are both humans. It's a level playing field. I don't have anything more than you. That we kind of annihilated as best we could the power gradient between doctor and patient.
Right.
We start looking that really we're two humans trying to figure out what this next step is, who have no idea what's coming around the corner.
Yes.
It's really an important place to start, because the system is built in this power gradient of doctor-patient, or, teacher-student, or, authority-client, etc. And that power gradient is insurmountable once it's established. But in the world of healing, in order to give someone back their true power, a level playing field is, I find, very desirous, and maybe even required. So we would start there and really get that we're working on this together, and we're maybe even detoxifying. So people think, well, yeah, but they're sick. What are you supposed to do? Well, actually, the sickness they have is frequently not a sickness. Even if you're depressed or you're anxious or you're fearful or you're sad or you're nervous or you're, maybe you have insomnia or you feel scattered or aimless or hopeless or helpless, all those negative vibration feelings. Mm-hmm. That does not mean that you're sick in any way. Not at all. Frankly, that might be the exact proper response to the world that's going on around you. So when we start getting that you're a human being in having a spiritual experience, or what I read today, which is that you're a spiritual being having a human experience, which I really like. I love that. I heard that today. I thought, that's good for Gretchen. I'm going to I saw that on Facebook and thought I'd bring it your way.
Yes.
When you get that, then what we get is the thing that I think really spans the gap here is this world of creativity and self-expression. And that's where Creative 8 really pops out of. That's where that book pops out of, because, we're born as creative. Just to live through another second in this world takes massive creativity. We think it's all just hum-ho, like ho-hum, like, just do what you do. But actually, you have to sort out so much just to take the next 5 seconds on. You have to decide what you're going to pay attention to. You have to decide what you're going to do or not do. You have to, figure out how you're going to stand, how you're going to, get fed, how you're going to breathe, who you're going to talk to, where you're going to, la, da, 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 da. There's so much creativity in every second of life. But when we can actually step that forward and become creators from anew, through art or singing or dancing or cooking or writing or gardening, when we can come, creative through, drama or photography or cleaning or there's many ways that we're, poetry, where we're really called on to be creative. It's amazing what happens when we stop using simply our voice to attempt to communicate with each other in an outward fashion. And finally, not a real magic ingredient in what's here is to listen. Listening is just as much a critical part of speaking or of communicating as speaking is. And you could even say that listening is more critical than speaking. And you can't get in trouble if all you're doing is listening. So there's a little break there. You can't say something that's going to get you like insulting people, or you can't get in trouble if all you're doing is listening to someone, even if you can't stand what they're saying. So listening gives you a real access to what's being called for in the relationship that you're in, and maybe what the person that you're with is really trying to say or bring out or discuss with you. And so listening is super critical. And when we started shifting this to the human nature aspects, the things that little Freddie knew by the time he entered kindergarten and still knows to be what's true, well then, guess what happened, Gretchen?
We started
People healed. Really, they really
love
did.
That.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Fred, what the heck is going on in the world right now with all of our children coming up, ADHD, or they all have a label? That, okay, all is a huge broad brush.
No, it's close enough. Close enough. I hear you.
Are we having a disconnect with communication in our households? What in the world? Or is it just that we have so many different drugs available and people are only committed, I can only have 15 minutes with this patient, so I'll write them a prescription?
Yeah. That's a great question. Thanks for asking it. It's very sensitive. And for those of you with children, I'm going to be very careful about this. I have 2 kids. And I've been around, I'm child and adolescent psychiatrist, board eligible for that, and took a fellowship. So I like working with kids, as I've said, in the state hospital. That's what got me, motivated to do this work. So, what's happening, it's not like these kids have ADHD. It's like look, if you interview these kids, here's what I have to say. If you actually interview these children before they start their medicine and get their diagnosis, you know what? You're going to find a wickedly fascinating soul.
Right.
They are onto something. They are onto something, in fact, that is so obvious that it can't be heard. So sometimes these kids who are scattered and not, they're not, no, I'm not looking at that blackboard with junk on it and telling you what that is. I got better things to do, like figuring out what my friend wants, or looking at this butterfly that's in the room, or getting up and going to talk to that person over there, or learning how to climb a tree, or, those kinds of things that often get mistaken for ADHD because a child won't sit in his seat and watch a teacher deliver extraordinarily boring information down their throat. Now, really, that's just being honest. And I love teachers. I do. This isn't about the teachers. Okay. I'm not putting down teachers at all. I can't underline that enough. This is not about putting down teachers.
Right.
But it is about asking kids to sit still and then regurgitate what you say. And if they don't do that, calling them sick is a extremely, extremely twisted assessment tool. Extremely twisted. But since almost anyone fits that mold, right? It's like, if you're really boring up front, or if you're really non-compassionate, if you're really unconnected, if you're really trying to drive silly stuff down a kid's mind who really just wants to learn how to be heard, and really wants to learn how to create a social network, and really wants to learn how to, how to listen, or how to communicate, or how to be creative. If you're really trying to drive stuff down that kid's throat instead, and he's not listening, he or she's not listening, and then you call him ADHD, and then you go get him a medicine that leaves him stuporous or even capable of doing what you say, and now you call him better, there is some inherent ludicrous, ineffective, twisted evaluation tools involved in that. And so almost every child can fit the mold of ADHD, especially if they tell the teacher no a few times. Yeah. No, I'm not sitting in my seat. Oh, that's cool. You're going to a doctor tomorrow. Really? What's a doctor? Oh, you'll come back in a week on Adderall and we'll talk about what a doctor is. And these days, it's not even a week, Gretchen. It's like 3 months before you get that first assessment, because doctors are backed up forever, because there's children in line to get their first medications as soon as possible, because teachers and families are blaming the children for issues of communication that really are not the children's space. And look, I'm telling you, once you got a kid on those medicines, if in fact they're... Oh, Gretchen, how'd you get me to speak to this?
I had to bring it up because this is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart, because I have some that I, really adore, some little ones that are on these meds.
Yeah.
And
I
I
know.
know so many of them. And now
I
you
know.
just touched on Adderall, which is another just hot.
Concerta, Adderall, Vyvanse.
Yes. I mean, I managed thousands of adults over 30 years, thousands.
Yeah.
And I know several of them were on Adderall. It's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
what the heck?
Yeah.
What the freak is going on here?
Yeah. Well, that medication is an interesting one. It's got massive street value. So if you, for the people who aren't on it, they can actually make a living on a month's worth of a prescription. So 60 Adderall will get you $1,200 in the street. So that's kind of good. You can do that. But that's a whole. Maybe I'm just teasing.
I
But
know
in
you
some
are.
ways, I'm not teasing. You see, there are some people doing that. You think Adderall in the streets? You know where it came from? It came from somebody's prescription.
Right.
It didn't come from the streets.
Yes.
You can't grow Adderall, right? Adderall is from the excess prescription somewhere. Someone decided, yeah, making $20 a pill is better than me giving it to my child. So you got that. Now, here's the thing. If these medications, and stimulants included, are actually perpetuating or causing the symptoms they're marketed to treat, such that the child seems to get a little bit better for a couple hours and then gets way worse than they were even before they had their first Adderall. Then you get more Adderall at that point. And a lot of people are taking, slow release Adderall in the morning and then fast release in the afternoon and maybe even a bump in the evening before they, as they get home, because supposedly they're having the symptoms relapse in the afternoon. So some people are on 3 or 4 doses a day. And that's because this medicine, among many of the other medicine, often causes spikes of the symptoms it's marketed to treat. Causes, meaning even if you didn't have ADHD and you started this medicine, you would have ADHD. That's what I'm talking about.
And I have heard this about other drugs as well. So, yeah. This blew my mind the first time I heard this.
Yeah, it blows people's minds until you realize that what I'm saying is the first time that you've ever heard anything about these drugs that actually makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I don't want to get...
It's not the drugs. It's not the drugs.
But the pharmaceutical companies...
It's not even the pharmaceutical companies.
Okay.
You listen, the system is built this way. Right? Just because a doctor tells a mom to give a kid a certain medicine, A, doesn't mean she has to do it. But B, what we have here, you don't have to do it. You don't. There's nothing illegal about not, you don't have to do it.
Oh, heck yeah.
If the doctor would say, give your child, 1.25 teaspoons of rat poison every morning, more than likely, most mothers wouldn't do that.
Right.
But the system is built to A, diagnose our kids or ourselves and get that there's something wrong with us, because mom is already upset that the teacher's reporting that Johnny can't sit still in the classroom. And mom doesn't want to look bad, and mom wants to do everything she can to have Johnny be an effective student. You can't blame mom either. Until you get that it's the diet. I've looked at this so many hundreds of times, if not thousands, not maybe these days, every single day, which is this idea that when you start blaming someone or calling someone diseased, afflicted, affected, it disenfranchises, it diminishes, it delegitimizes people, right? And when that happens, when the child now says, oh, I thought I was just being me, and the world says, no, you're being you, but the fact that you can't follow a history lesson, you're sick, and so we're gonna jam toxic medicines down your throat the rest of your life. And he's like, okay, thanks for telling me. I didn't know I was sick, and now there's a cycle here. So that's the bad news. And there's some bad news in there, but there's some really great news. And the great news is, after looking at this for the hours and days, and years, really, I've looked at it. The idea here is that the essence of the whole issue is that we start thinking there's something wrong with us, and then we start really looking hard to fix us. In reality, perhaps there's nothing wrong at all with any of these people.
Right.
That it isn't about it being wrong, right? Now I got it. Johnny, he's got trouble sitting down. So you know what Johnny wants more than anything? Johnny wants to be heard.
Yeah.
Johnny wants to be listened to. Johnny wants to be loved and respected for his curiosity. Johnny wants to be a creative. He does. I promise. I swear. I promise. I don't even know Johnny right this moment. I guarantee he has every one of those qualities.
Right.
So let's try that first. Let's try that first.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Let's
Absolutely.
let's try it for real. Not like, Johnny, why won't you learn about Benjamin Franklin? It's like, because Benjamin Franklin doesn't fit in my worldview. Like,
Right.
I want to know, how to milk a cow. Or I want to know how to talk to a friend. I want to learn how to listen. I want to learn how to communicate. I want to learn how to draw. I want to learn how to dance. I want to learn how to play the harmonica. Whatever.
Right. Yes, I can relate to that actually. I mean, I can remember, gosh, I think I must have been in about the 3rd grade, just sitting in the classroom thinking, this is the most boring information I've ever learned in my life.
Exactly.
And I'm daydreaming out the window looking at flowers. And then thinking, well, maybe I have a little ADHD, which I don't even think it had that label at that time. But it was, whatever was happening was not entertaining enough to me. And a lot of school was that way. And I managed to do pretty good considering. So, but it's interesting because nowadays people are really quick to label themselves, but it's almost as if that gives an excuse.
Okay. So the word excuse does roll around me a few times. And so I've decided I don't like that word so much. So let me see if I can offer a better way to look at that.
Please.
An explanation.
There. Much better.
Because, look, we are fallible human beings. This idea of being human, it's not. It's all cracked up to be. We make some ridiculous mistakes, and then we make them over again. We hurt people. We don't stand up for ourselves. We don't do what we said we were going to do. We say the wrong things. We ignore or inadvertently or sometimes advertently. We dismiss. We do all sorts of stuff. Us humans, nothing I said. There's nobody out there, and you're listening, who doesn't relate to any of the things that little small list I just gave. And we all do it. Let's be honest. We all do it. Now, if I can get an explanation, because I hate when I do that. I don't know about you, but yes, I do. You do too. We all hate when we do that.
Right.
It's like, wow, I am such a jerk. Wow, I am such a fool. Wow, I am incorrigible. I am, blah, blah, blah. I am whatever painful adjective you want to put in there, or a painful descriptor. If I then can get an explanation for why I'm that disconnects that from me, I'm in. I'm so in. That means I won't have to blame myself anymore. That means I won't have to take on the shame and the guilt of being the fool that I really am. And so if you tell me, hey, Fred, that's not you anymore. That's actually, you look like bipolar to me. I'm like, oh, really? Oh, that's exciting. You mean I can actually write this off to bipolar? Yep. Oh, cool. So the next time I'm ridiculous with my kids, when I sit them down later at dinner and try to deal with it, I'll let them know that it was not me, my bipolar kicking in.
Yeah.
And we'll all be happy. Mom has bipolar, dad has bipolar, whatever. And it's an unfortunate circumstance that I got to grow up with someone with mental illness, but at least we have an explanation, because underneath it all, mom would have been flawless, except she has a psychiatric diagnosis. So the system is beautiful.
Right.
It is gorgeous. Oh my God. Diabolical as it might be, if you start assessing and, pointing fingers at what the problematic aspects of it are, in its construction, it's wickedly, incredibly, exceptionally beautiful.
Right.
I wish I would have designed it. Right? If I would have designed it, I'd be living in the hills somewhere. I wish I would have designed it,
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it?
It
Oh my
is.
goodness. So the reality of it is look, we all feel a little down sometimes. We,
Or even a lot down. Even
or
a
even a
lot
lot.
down.
Yeah. I mean, I've lived in the Pacific Northwest, and I'll be the first one to say I think seasonal, affective
Affective
disorder
disorder,
is
yeah.
yeah.
You Seattle people have that, yeah.
But I also know, oh, okay, winter's coming and Gretchen might get a little down. And so
Yeah.
maybe it's time to book a vacation to Mexico.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Again, I'd even be careful about calling it seasonal affective disorder, right? It's the disorder part that I have trouble with.
mhm.
You can get when it's rainy, cloudy, and you haven't seen the sun in a while, your mood tends to go down. That's okay. But to call it a disorder is not okay in my world.
I like
It's
that.
not a disorder. It's not a syndrome. It's not an illness. It's not a disease. It's just what happens.
Yeah.
It's just what happens. You don't see the sun for a while, you get down. Okay. And guess what? So would I. So does everyone. So Seattle, if you're in Puget Sound and you're just not getting it, okay. I totally get it. So you want your mood not to be down? There are things you can do. You want to book a trip to Mexico? Great idea. You want to there's other things you can do if you don't, or you could actually there's other ways to be not down too. You can be of service, or you can do this creative 8 exercises. You can find ways to speak to your depression and even speak to the truth of it. You can volunteer, you can volunteer and be of service in so many places. Or maybe you can just speak the truth about, what you had been calling SAD, which is really just seasonal affective, maybe disturbance, or contribution. But in reality, there's nothing disordered at all about the fact that our mood goes down when we don't see the sun for a while.
Right.
It's not disordered. That's called good for you. Thanks for being human.
Yeah. Yeah. But we don't need to run right out and take a pill for it.
Oh no, please don't. Please don't.
Yes, there are so many other alternatives, and that's what I love about you being the undoctor.
Right, exactly. Yeah, there is. And the alternatives are not even hard. And let me underline again what I said before, because it's really important. It sometimes gets misheard. You can imagine in 2006 when all these people started getting better, I was like, uh-oh, what am I going to do with this information?
Right.
Like, how am I going to bring this into the world? Do I have to quit and become a barista? By the way, I'm open for that. If someone's got a really good coffee shop, I'm so down with that. I've had enough already, and I had enough when I the truth is, when I took that job in 1980 at Fairlawn Center, my intention was to keep that job for exactly 3 weeks, because that's how long orientation lasted. And I was getting paid like $13 an hour. And it was, 13 times 40 is like $500, and 3 $500 checks would be enough to buy me a car so that I could, go drive around the country, go back to Berkeley or something and figure out what my life was about. But it was that 4th week where I was seduced into going up to the unit and began talking. And I actually remember the names and the stories of the first few kids I began talking to that week. And where I really started getting, oh, this is kind of fun. This is more than kind of fun. Like, we're both healing each other by being connected. And so I bring up that 3-week thing because I decided, with the help of my friend Paul, Paul's like, Fred, you can't quit. I'm like, dude, I'm quitting after orientation. He's like, no, you need to come up. Because if you quit, I'll have to quit. I'm like, oh. So he got me that way, right? So I came up with him. And I said, okay, I'll stay for 3 more weeks. You know why I was staying for 3 more weeks? So that I could get 3 more paychecks and buy a nicer car to drive around the country and figure out what my life was about. That's the only reason I went up to the floors. So for 42 years, I've been planning on quitting in 3 weeks. We're 42 years later, now 2022. And I'm going to quit in 3 weeks, Gretchen. And you know what I'm going to do in 3 weeks? I'm going to buy me a car. I'm going to drive around the country and figure out what my life is about. I'm still there. I'm 64 years old. I got the same dreams. It's just I got stuck in this I'm going to quit in 3 weeks cycle. That's it.
All right. We better get working on that.
I know. I really do need to put in my 3 weeks notice here pretty soon.
Right.
Mhm.
But that's what we're all doing is we're just all trying to figure out what we want to do with the rest of our lives. A lot of
Exactly.
us. And then unfortunately some people get so stuck in that rut that it causes them to be what they think is depression,
Yeah.
or they just, they get antsy and they can't see straight, and
Yeah.
yeah, but we're all just trying to do our best.
Well, now, you see those last two things you said. We're all just trying to figure out what we're doing for the rest of our lives, and we're all just trying to do our best. You said that, and there's are other things that I'm sure you would say if I would left you more time. Here's the thing. Just bring that to every conversation. And when
Yeah.
you talk about healing, when you talk about that guy over there who's got bipolar, who's been on medicine for 44 years, or that guy over there who's got ADHD who, can't sit still and, get, punch the teacher one day, or you got, whatever, the guy with depression who's been in and out of the hospital with involuntary admissions.
Mhm.
What you really want to get is that's what that person's trying to do too.
Right.
That's what they're trying to do too. They're trying to figure out what their life is about.
Yep.
They really are. I know people call up, what about the guy who shot up the school in Texas? Look, first of all, how horribly, 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 horribly unfortunate and terrible that is. But if we could set aside something for a second, I guarantee that 18-year-old kid who did that, I'll tell you, he wanted to be heard. I'm not saying that if we would have heard him, he wouldn't have done that. I don't mean, please, audience, understand that I feel the pain of that. I am a dad. I have treated kids. I am not diminishing the impact of such a horrendous action.
Right.
But I can tell you that the person who did it wanted to be heard. I
Mhm.
promise. And somewhere along the line was pretty sure that he wasn't being heard, as most of us are.
Right. And that's kind of where I wanted the conversation to go to, is
Mhm.
just the fact that there is a lot of that going on in our world and in our country. And it's a shame because honestly, I feel like where technology has evolved to and how the world has evolved, especially in our country, we seem to be more disconnected, even though we can connect 24/7 through our phones if we want to, but we are not listening to people. We are not present in the moment with people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is sad, isn't it? Let's start there.
Yeah. It
Let's
is
just
sad.
stop. Let's just stop right there for a second before I pretend to have a good answer for you. Can we cry together?
If I can conjure up a tear,
Yeah, right.
yes.
Can we hug? Can we hold each other's hand and look at this?
Very true.
Can you be devastated? Can you own your devastation?
Yeah.
Can you be just grievous? Can you own your grief? That's called welcome to humanity.
Yeah.
I'm not sitting here as the authority of how to make the human race a bunch of angels. I'm not. I don't got it. I don't have the inside track on that one. Sorry.
No, but what you touched on was beautiful because there is so much going on in the world, whatever it is. It could just be trying to get to school in the morning or trying to get home
Mhm.
from work at night.
Yeah.
That we don't take the time to pause and grieve and feel our feelings and, have a tear or two. We don't.
No.
We just keep it moving.
Let me ask you a question, Gretchen, because I think we just walked through a really loving space. In those few seconds when I was asking you to, can you pause and get your pain?
Hmm.
How did you feel when I was giving you that space? Isn't there something just deeply grounding and healing instantaneously as you explore that? Instantaneous.
There really is. First of all, because nobody's asked me to do anything like that, maybe ever, come to think of it. I
Hmm.
do that on my own, which brings me to I think that other people probably do too. And if we don't do that on our own, then we never do. And we have it just, emotions are just stuffed down.
Hmm.
But that's probably the most healing thing that I've heard and was asked to do in years. And by the way, I'm talking to you from Texas.
Hmm.
And it's really sad because the Uvalde situation has been, in the forefront of the mind,
Yeah.
and something that my husband and I talk about. And it's really sad because we just keep it moving. And I think even out of my mouth, which I know better, is words that come out like, I think that we're becoming immune to some of these tragedies.
Hmm.
And it's sad. And we really do need to process this.
Yeah. So the immunity is also an experience that's undeniable.
Yes.
We can't even keep our school shootings straight anymore.
Right. Yeah.
We
Yes.
we,
And
we have no idea which one you're talking about. How many kids died in that one? It's like,
right. Well,
what
and
was that? Yeah.
as
Go
a matter
ahead.
of fact, I said I was from the Pacific Northwest. I'm actually originally from Springfield, Oregon, which is where one of the very first school shootings took place.
Hmm.
And when I was recently just talking about the situation that happened here in Texas, I was talking to my husband, which we met in Southern California. And
Hmm.
I said, one of the first shootings took place at the high school that I actually graduated from. Now, granted, it was probably, I don't know, 10 years after I graduated. I really
Sure.
don't know.
Sure.
And he's like, what was that? Because we've had so many, because this has become so frequent that we don't even know what's happening or when or recall.
Hmm.
It's common day.
Yeah.
Okay, so that leads me to a question I want to ask you, which is, how is the United States managing mental health differently than some of the top, I want to say top performing countries, but I think you get the gist of what I'm trying to ask. Some of maybe the healthier, or how are
Right.
they managing their mental health different from us? And what can we do differently? And can it start in the homes? And can it start now?
Oh boy. Okay, good.
I just asked you a lot.
No, it's really the same question. I got it. And in the world is that it's funny, when I started doing Global Madness, the documentary, when I, had a little team going before the lockdown, which right now is kind of still on pause. Although I've heard every time people introduce me, they, of course, bring that up, and I'm like, oh yeah, I should get right on that now again. The countries like Norway, Rwanda, Zimbabwe, rural Australia are doing things that are so seemingly odd and often would be considered woo-woo by our Western self-righteous societies.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a place in Rwanda where there's 6 million, the population's 6 million, they have 3 psychiatrists. And they're like, okay, what are we going to do? So they have these things called orange picnic benches. And they house grandmothers, actual grandmothers, bona fide grandmothers, to sit on these benches all day and do whatever they do, feed the birds or knit or whatever grandmothers do in that situation. And if you're having a problem, you're allowed to go over there, no charge. You don't have to bill insurance or anything. You just go over there and have your conversation with grandma. That's it. Grandma
I love
listens.
it. I love it.
And guess
Fred,
what
give me
happens?
an orange bench, please. I'll go sit
Yep.
on one for a while.
Yep. And guess what happens, Gretchen? Now that we've had a little pattern with this same answer.
Well, I'm assuming that people will come over
Heal.
and talk, and they're fine.
They heal.
Yes.
They heal. And no Prozac anywhere to be found. No Seroquel. No therapies. No diagnoses. Just connection. At the heart of all healing, all human healing, you will find connection.
I love that.
Of all conditions, of all types, you will find connection. And without connection, nothing will heal. And with connection, it becomes entirely possible. So that's one. There's another one who does this thing called, in Australia, this guy, I'm just recalling, he has this thing called, I think it's called like, it's not called surf therapy. It's called surf something, where he teaches people how to surf in a 2-week period. Whatever your deal is, you're depressed, you're anxious, you're grieving, whatever your problem is, you're afraid, you're not eating well, whatever your deal is, you show up with him, and for 2 weeks, he just takes you out into the ocean and teaches you how to surf.
I love that.
Guess what happens in 2 weeks?
The person's healing.
Yeah, unquestionably.
Yes.
Unquestionably. So what are people doing different than the United States? They're actually treating people like humans. And the only way to do that is to be human yourself. You can't treat anyone like a human if you think you're above it all.
Right.
Or if you think you're below it all. But you know what you can do? You can get, I'm human. I sometimes think I'm above it all. And other times I think I'm below it all. That's called being human.
Mm-hmm.
I'm human. I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. Now, how do we do that? Well, the way that we do that is just drop your guns. Start listening. That kid over there has got ADHD, supposedly, which he doesn't. But anyways, he's been told he does, so he will now forever. That kid. You know what he wants to be done? He wants to be heard. I promise you.
Right.
So when you listen to him like he's never been heard before, I know it's becoming kind of repetitive, but guess what will happen to him?
He's going to heal.
You'll see a smile like you've never seen. I've been lucky enough to see hundreds of those smiles in my life, where someone's like, wow, no one's ever hurt me. Even in fact, just with you a little bit ago, it's asking you a question you've not really taken on. A simple question, stop.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. Stop. You want to be honest about this stuff? It's freaking ludicrous. It's totally insane.
It's so simple.
It's
simple. Completely being overlooked. Exactly.
It's that simple that it's always overlooked. And in fact, it sounds like it's an unevolved approach.
Right.
I maintain that is the only approach that can work.
Yeah.
Now, for the third time in this conversation, with all honest due respect, any of your listeners who are in touch with their psychiatric diagnosis and have a treatment and an intervention schedule that has actually worked and brought them out of the hole so that they wouldn't trade that in for the world because they know that's as good as it's going to get and they're happy with it, I'm honored to know you, and I even envy and admire you. Congratulations, and please don't stop doing what you're doing under any conditions. Right? If that's what you found, man, I don't have anything better than that. That's what I'm shooting for. Right? So it's not for them.
So, Dr. Fred, if there is somebody listening that's on some of the medications or they have a diagnosis, anyhow, perhaps especially if they are on a medication, we're not saying give it up tomorrow.
No.
No, they need to work with their provider, right?
Well, it's a little trickier than that. And that's where I come in as the undoctor. Unfortunately, it's trickier than that because providers are never really taught about how to discontinue medicines. I was never taught that. All I was taught was how to add, increase, or change medicines. And in discontinuing medicines, you want to shock the world. It's when I start telling people that like you're like, ho, 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 you stop medicine, but what did you replace it with? Right? That's the average, So it sounds like discontinuing medicines is the riskiest thing to do and could lead to a malpractice suit because people are worried that if you stop medicine and someone does something stupid, then you're going to be blamed for it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So people don't really do that. They don't, because it does happen, it does happen. So what you want to do is the providers are not typically prepared to stop medicines. They're mostly prepared to add, increase, or change your medicine, meaning add a new medicine, increase the dose of the present medicine, or change to a different medicine. But or they could also introduce this concept of weaning, which is really less than about a decade old, really, that it's now being applied to all medicine, which is a really hilarious way to come off a medicine, because the longer you wean, the more likely you are to slip on a banana peel and blame the medicine for that. Right? You're coming off a medicine, you run over your cat. And you're like,
right.
Holy cow, I never ran over my cat when I was on my full dose.
Yeah.
And so I'm going back to my other medicine. And then you start telling a story. Yeah, I started coming off medicine, and then I ran over my cat. And I thought, hell, I'm not coming off medicine anymore. And I got back on my medicine, I'm never going to come off. So the longer we take a weaning schedule, the more likely it is that you'll be cemented into whatever medicine you're trying to wean. So weaning is not always the right way to go. So here's where my coaching comes in. This is why, rapid restorative healing is what I call it. And this is where the Undoctor comes in, where I no longer am your doctor when you work with me. I'm not your doctor. I'm your guide. We start looking at strategic plans on how to deal with your providers, or how to deal with your diagnoses, how to deal with your present circumstances, so that you can make an effort and a successful effort to actually decrease or eliminate your medicines, but more so to decrease or alter or in fact eliminate your diagnosis. This whole idea that there was anything wrong with you in the first place is what drives this whole thing. And that's what I'm saying is the good news. The good news is there is, from the client perspective, a patient perspective, the recipient perspective, there is a way to get to, confidently, that there's nothing wrong with me. And of course, if there's nothing wrong with me, really, and I can, I can live life like there's nothing wrong with me, then I don't need any treatment to alter who I am. Because that's what all these treatments are geared towards, altering who you are, which last time I looked, there's no one who's ever been able to alter who they were. Everyone is who they are.
Right. Great point.
You're who you are. That's the way it is.
Yeah.
You want to be someone else? Sorry, you're not.
You are you. I guess this is a good point in an area to go ahead and talk about information I have here that says that you're now offering a 30-minute consult. Mm-hmm. And that usually costs about $200. So that sounds like a heck of a deal. So if anyone's interested in working with you. Yeah. I'm looking for, for a while there, I was just doing the high ticket items, and the high ticket items are great. I do, intensive work with people who can afford intensive work, and we can do this in, 1 to 3 months. We can really walk you through the whole system. And and maybe that'll be for some people, but what we're looking at here in the free consultation, I now have developed so many ways, from the true voice technology. I teach people how to find their true voice. And then I generally use podcasting as the broadcasting mechanism to get that done. So, really helping people get their true voice, their authentic message out to a world that's eager, interested, willing, ready to receive it. Mm-hmm. So that's a true voice aspect. And then we use the creative aid as well. But really what I'm doing at this point is exploiting the 42 years and 40,000 patients and hundreds of thousands of medications written, by the way, and not necessarily proudly, but just true. Because I know the system as well as I do, because I am, pretty well versed in how most of the certain intersections of the system work. I can really help people to maybe even turn on their providers to the possibility that that improvement is available. Because most providers, if you're about the same as you were last time, everyone's happy. That should not be what you're looking for. That's not the gold standard there.
Not at all.
Not that we're looking for.
Not what we're looking for. But that's considered a really clean visit.
Right.
How you doing? I'm not worse. Oh, great.
Right. And I'm laughing, and I apologize because it's really not funny, but it just goes to show you how backwards our system is.
Right. No, we're not shooting for better. In mental illness, we're not shooting for better. We're shooting for containment or slowing down deterioration.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that better, in fact, optimization is available for all people who are ready to take that on. So the consultation will discuss where you're at and which level of entry might be important to you, whether it's group coaching, individual coaching, rapid restorative healing, or coming in as a new podcaster, or the creative eight. Like, we'll talk about where you are and how I can be useful, if at all. And if I can't be useful, I probably know a place where I can send you. So I start getting that my services are pretty unique. I'm sure there might be others out here doing it, but not with this kind of experience. It's a rare bird, frankly, that has 40,000 patients and is out here speaking this stuff.
Right.
So the idea is that because I know the system, I'm really curious and interested in what your experience is. And then we create a program from there. And that's why I decided, for my podcasting listeners, to offer a free consultation so that we can really access what's being called for and how I or someone I know or a system that I know can provide that directly. Last I looked, we get one chance at this thing called life.
Exactly.
So it's not, and the future is not, if we don't figure out how to be aligned with ourselves, like right about yesterday, the future, it's looking kind of grim.
Right. We really need to change the direction that we're going.
Yeah. Like write this, maybe pronto.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and the beauty of it is that we have the power in our own hands. We just need to take the steps to do it.
We do.
Yeah. Well, wonderful. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today, because I think this really needed to be heard. And I have wonderful links available for the listeners to.
Let me give one more link, because the book I wrote somehow we bypassed this, or we didn't get to it. The book I wrote this year I really love this book. I actually really like reading it. I've read it a few times. I'm like, oh, I like this guy. Oh, that's me. Like that. I really like it. It's called findyourtruevoicebook.com, and I will send a free copy of the actual book to any of your listeners. It's a cool book, and it really takes a deeper dive into what I'm talking about here and what's at the heart of the matter. It's an easy read, and it really is something that the people who are reading it are, giving me pretty solid feedback that it's changing their lives. So it's my pleasure to send that to your listeners as well. And that's at findyourtruevoicebook.com. And then you'll have, I think, my acuity schedule. Or you can go to welcometohumanity.net and book a consultation with me as well, in which case I'll be right there, and we'll talk and see what we can offer.
Wonderful. Yes, and I will have links to all of this in the show notes. And I have to say that welcometohumanity.com, is it .com or .net?
It's .net. Thanks for asking.
.net.
Yeah.
Okay, so very important, .net. Beautiful comments on there, all kinds of rave reviews. And I just really like the concept of Welcome to Humanity. And by the way, I just want to put this back out there for the listeners. You have the podcast as well with a lot of great information on it.
I do. My podcast, I've interviewed some of the greatest people, and I even have others in backwash here that I can't wait to publish. But I've been very lucky to be surrounded with great people, and they make the podcast great, but I guess I'm a pretty good interviewer for 40,000 people later. And there are cool conversations really shining a light on the spectacular nature of not just these awesome influencers, but of all of humanity, because that's really, as I mentioned, that's what I came here to do 64 years ago. And that's what I'm finally getting, at least scratching the surface to be able to do.
I love that. All right. Well, let's leave it right there then, Dr. Fred. Thank you so much for coming onto this earth and helping us all find our voice and communicate better. Thank you.
It's
so
been a
much.
pleasure. Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Hey all, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Spiritual Life Management Podcast. I truly appreciate you for listening. If you would like more information on where to connect with Dr. Fred Moss, please read below in the show notes where you're listening to this episode. In addition, you will find his link to his free book and free consultation. If you're interested in connecting with me, your host, Gretchen Smith, please also look below in the show notes for additional links and information. You can find me at Instagram at Gretchen Smith Coaching for more inspirational information, quotes, and inspiring daily tips. Additionally, you can email me at GretchenSmithCoaching@gmail.com if you're interested in working with me. If you found this episode helpful and useful and you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you're notified when future episodes release. Additionally, help us reach more listeners by liking this episode. Or if you feel that someone else might benefit from this episode, please hit the share button. Again, I truly appreciate you listening, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Namaste. Please note, all information in this episode was for educational and empowerment purposes only.